Welcome to Digital Health Talks, where innovators and changemakers share how they're transforming healthcare through technology. Join Megan Antonelli, who will be shining a light on the good things happening in digital health.
Women are half the population and half the workforce, and roughly 6% of private healthcare capital goes to the conditions that affect them. My guest ran the math and landed somewhere most of healthcare still resists. Closing the gap is worth $1 trillion a year to the global economy, which means women's health is not a cause. It is infrastructure. This is Megan Antonelli, CEO of Health Impact Live, and this is Digital Health Talks. My guest today does not just make this argument, she is building the proof. Marissa Fayer has spent 25 years in medtech. She took an AI imaging company from concept through FDA clearance and into the market. And this month, the World Economic Forum named that company a 2026 technology pioneer. A 2-year cohort that puts her shoulder to shoulder with the people setting the global health and capital agenda for the next decade. She also wrote the operator's playbook for treating women's health like the infrastructure it already is. Hi, Marissa. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to have you here on the show. You had, I saw on LinkedIn, as I do, you're out to dinner with some very, great women from the New York healthcare community. And it caught my attention. And then I was very excited to read about your book. So tell our audience a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into the new book.
Absolutely. So 26-year medtech exec, engineer by background with an MBA, but I've been in healthcare my entire career. I've been in women's health for 21 of those 26 years. So it's been a while before it was popular. But new product development, mergers and acquisitions, and then became a serial entrepreneur about 15 years after. I was in corporate for 15 years, and I realized later on why I was fighting with everybody. And it's because apparently I'm an entrepreneur. And so started a global nonprofit, started a consulting firm, and have just been doing a lot of executive work. And currently I'm the CEO of DeepLook Medical, which is a software imaging company in the imaging and radiology space. And I also serve as CEO of and founder of Her Health EQ, a global nonprofit focused on women's health in developing countries. So, and a whole bunch of things, funds, advising, board positions, all the things, because I think it's boring to do just one.
Yes. Well, amazing. And it's such a, I think, as you said, before it was popular, and lately thankfully, there has been some attention to women's health and certainly some funding going their way. But I think, I said in the open that certainly the amount of funding now is something around 6%. And obviously it affects a lot more than 6% of the population. And particularly when it comes to breast cancer, and I know the work that you do with DeepLook Medical, the issue of deep breast tissue has become something that more people are aware of now, having to go back for multiple tests. But tell us a little bit about DeepLook and how you got into that work.
Yeah, so dense breast tissue affects 45% of all women. They say, we all know it's actually about 70% of all women, because just a lot of it hasn't been tested and reported. So, the issue with dense breasts is that you can't visualize in standard imaging. Now, this is standard imaging, by the way, that I've developed and created and launched. So it's not like it's a secret. This is known. And by the standard mammograms, you just cannot see through dense breast tissue, because dense breast tissue shows up white, and so does cancer on mammograms. And so you need a software technology that can visualize the differences between dense breasts and a possible lesion, or a mass. So this is where software comes in. This is the benefits of technology and AI, to just be a software add-on on top of the existing imaging, because the imaging still needs to happen and everyone still needs to get it. Like, I'm not saying don't get it. Like, you actually very much should get it, but radiologists have a really hard time seeing it. And it's no fault of any human. It's just they're humans and they're not computers. And so we're a software that helps them visualize. And the intent is to reduce the amount of tests that women with dense breast have to come back repeatedly for. So you don't have to come back for 2 or 3 mammograms. You don't have to come back for an ultrasound. You don't have to come back maybe for a biopsy, because the radiologist can see what they're looking for, instead of just saying, actually, we can't see, so we have to have you back for more imaging. And this affects me. This affects, my family. This affects, friends. I mean, I don't think there's a room where I go in when I tell people about DeepLook, and they're just like, oh, I've never heard of it. Everybody knows of somebody. Oh,
Right.
this just happened to me, or I have dense breasts. I mean, that's why it's, we think that it's probably 70% of all women.
Right. No, absolutely. I've had to go back myself.
Exactly.
And certainly with the amount of the time it takes to just make those appointments, let alone when you get there and you have to wait and all that stuff. So it certainly saves money. And in terms of the software itself gets embedded in existing workflows and software that exists.
Correct. So we embed ourselves into existing workflows. So it's not something extra that a radiologist typically has to do. Something they can, oh, this is interesting. I want to actually just make one extra click, and there it is. It's not done on every single image. It's not done in every single area. They want to take, pun intended, a deeper look. They click a button for something that's already embedded into their workflow. And what we do is we partner with some of the larger, big companies, so that it's already part of their product, and it's an add-on to their product, and it's something that they can sell, we sell, and the radiologists just use it.
Right. Amazing. That's great. And we talk about it a lot in terms of sort of why the healthcare system has focused on men, and women were kind of studied, smaller men, or just, not at all to some degree. And, with your experience, having worked in this space for so long, tell us from your side of things, kind of why has women's health kind of stayed on the sidelines for so long? Why has it taken, way too long for us to get here where there's seemingly some attention being focused on it?
Well, first of all, I want to also point out that women's health has been a priority. It just hasn't been categorized as a priority, or it hasn't been categorized as women's health. So there's been a ton of exits that have happened. There's been a ton of work that's happened, and a lot of it's just called oncology. So I'm not to diminish, because listen, there's not enough work being done on women's health. So we can be very clear on that. But there has been a ton of work. I mean, there's entire companies that are based around women's health. They just, again, are calling it, they're an imaging company or an oncology company, or, or other types of companies. But it just hasn't been prioritized. And the other point is the people who have been controlling the capital have typically been men. And it's not a priority issue for them. And none of it's out of malice. It's just simply out of ignorance of knowing what the space is and what the problems are, because they're not necessarily experiencing having to go back 4 different times every 6 months for a mammogram and additional imaging, or they're not having to, have a speculum, put in their vagina for cervical cancer screenings or things like that. So these are just things that they're not used to, and used to not want to talk about. Now, in our culture, we love to talk about everything, thank goodness. And so it's out there a lot more. I really, truly, to my core, don't think any of it was based on malice. It was just ignorance, simply. It was simply ignorance. And the people who are controlling the money used to be like 99%. Now, I think we're at 90%. So it keeps getting better. It is men. And they just, you invest in things and you develop products in categories that you understand. And if you don't understand it, you're not going to necessarily invest in it.
Right. Yeah. And I think to your point, I mean, we're seeing so many more entrepreneurs that are women focusing on the challenges that they're having and the health issues that they have. And therefore there's a little bit more product out there. And certainly as we've kind of come through, I think with menopause, and women have hit that generation, and they're out there and they were building products, on both sides. And then they hit this period of their life. And then there's been a number of products and services and that have become available, and both the attention to those are coming. So it's great to see there. From your side of things, I know as you've written the book and as you've done the research behind this, and the book is called Undervalued to Unavoidable. So tell us a little bit about that, and maybe a little bit around, how that ties into kind of the menopause and women's health story that's sort of unfolding now.
Well, we used to be undervalued. And, undervalued is a financial term. So we used to be undervalued and not invested in. It's not just in money invested. It's invested as far as workplace programs, or invested in as far as making policies that are for us, and uninvested and undervalued related to products that were for us. And now it's unavoidable. As you said, we're in your face. Like, all these women are hitting menopause. I mean, celebrities are talking about it. So, and honestly, the subtitle is Women's Health as Infrastructure. And it's about investing in the things that are the base layer of infrastructure for our society. So we have no problem putting money and thought and process and projects together for roads and for bridges and for buildings. But half the population, 51% of the population, are women. And if they don't have their health to use those things, what are you investing in those things for? So we are the base layer. We are the ones that are focused on making sure children are going to school, making sure that new products are coming out and being developed that are appropriate. I'm a woman engineer. I was one of the few women engineers in the room in a lot of the corporate positions that I had. And that's not acceptable. Now, a lot of it's changing, but there's a lot of companies where it's still not being discussed. And so when we talk about undervalued, we were, and now we're in your face, and we should be, because it's unavoidable that women's health is here and that we're talking about it. And so it has everything to do with what we're all experiencing every single day.
Right. Yeah. And I think that distinction between, kind of women's health as kind of a cause. Yes, of course we should support women's health and that versus.
It's a charity. It's not a charity. I mean, there's plenty of charities focused on it, but we're a culture. I mean, this is who we are. This is, we're here.
Right. Well, and I think when you think about a woman's health journey, right, and that from childbearing age to menopause, the impact on productivity and performance and, what they spend money on. And of course, women also spend a lot of money on healthcare, being in many cases the main kind of healthcare decision maker in a household. So the idea that they wouldn't be focused on or wouldn't be a good value in the market is almost, it's counterintuitive to anyone who's really paying attention. But I think the work side of it is also a place we don't hear about it as much. I have a friend who launched, an event in that space, kind of menopause and work, and what that means and why employers should care. And I think we're seeing that a lot more.
You're listening to Digital Health Talks. When we return, we'll continue our discussion on how technology is revolutionizing healthcare delivery. Stay with us to hear more insights on creating sustainable, patient-centered digital health solutions.
What's your experience been, though, in writing the book and talking to folks?
Women are their most productive and are hitting the peak of their careers, just as they're also hitting perimenopause and menopause. And, menopause is a moment. Perimenopause is 7 to 10 years before that moment. And then there's the 7 to 10 years afterwards. We're talking about a 15 to 20 year part of a woman's life when they're hitting their most productive in companies. And honestly, 10 to 15% of them are having to step away because there's not support programs in place, or they don't have the right products to manage the symptoms. There's nothing anybody can do to stop the process. Fertility and pregnancy is a choice. And everyone supports that, and we have parties for it. And there's leave and all of these things. Menopause is inevitable. Some people get affected. The very few don't. And you're at your most productive stage. You've spent 20 years in your career building this up. And the workforce we're leaving. And companies are suffering as a result of this. So I've started to see a lot of companies finally start to put programs in place to have support systems that you can take leave, or there's new programs in place thank goodness there's remote working sometimes. Also, many times you're in a point where you are still child care, you're also elder care, and you're trying to take care of yourself and your family. So there's just a lot going on. And I think companies are realizing they're having a really hard time retaining talent in general. And now you have women who are at the primes of their careers that are also having to choose to leave because they're not supported. That doesn't help any economy. It doesn't help any company. It doesn't help anybody. And so that's what I've been seeing. We also have to think about this on a global scale. So what I focus on in the book almost explicitly is the global scale of women's health and what this looks like, because this is not an American problem. This is an everywhere problem. It's not just American women who are going through menopause. We might be the most vocal about it because we are the most vocal, probably, but this is an everywhere problem, and it looks different everywhere. It also looks different for different demographics. And we have to think about what that looks like as well. It's actually oftentimes worse symptoms for Black women. Why? The answer is why? We don't know. And this is where the investment also has to go in to understand why and put these programs in place to support them.
Right. And while there is attention, and certainly we're seeing celebrities talk about it, and there's certainly some funding going to some of the companies, there's still, I think you mentioned in the book, kind of a mispriced market versus not an unproven one. So why what's taking so long? What do people still need to understand to kind of get that money where it needs to be?
I wish I had an answer for you. I have no idea what is taking so long. There's a lot of people that are starting to come around to it, but it's slow. And we know that institutions move slowly. So the fast movers are making changes very quickly. And these are smaller funds. These are NGOs. These are small companies like in the women's health space that are moving quickly, but institutions generally take a long time. So when we think about, they're not moving, I agree. Period. End of sentence. I agree. It's not moving fast enough. But when we think about changes that need to be made at the very large institutions, it does take time. And I don't think it should. That's why I'm an entrepreneur, because I can't, I don't like the bureaucracy of it. I know we have to work within it. But I don't know why things are taking so long. I think we're at this point where it's starting to amplify at a greater pace than it was many years ago. And again, we've been talking about women's health forever. Finally, it's picking up, the speed and it's getting the attention. And there's bigger market movers that are making it have this attention with their celebrity, their credibility, their movement. There's also some companies that are larger now that are starting to, garner their attention. It's still too slow, and sadly, I wish I had an answer for you because I don't. I don't know. And continuing to put the money and the decisions in more women's hands will make it move faster. That's where I think, because again, it's not just money; it's decisions within corporations. If the decision makers and the policy makers, those are more women, that will move faster.
Right. Yeah. It's sort of this misconception that it's the market is too small, but, it's literally 50% of the marketplace and of active, real active participants, certainly more engaged in their health. Maybe I'm being a little stereotypical, but typically they are. And, and so in terms of the purchases that are, the purchasing power when it comes to health, it lays in their hands. So the idea that, that the investment isn't there is kind of crazy. And I think we're seeing that. It's obviously after years of kind of being told hormone therapy is not safe, the winds are shifting there. What are you seeing in terms of funding rooms and people's attitudes around that right now?
I think finally people are starting to move. And there's so much data that's out there, and it's enough with the data. People are actually like, okay, enough, enough. I see it. And they're wanting to do something about it, finally. And this is where a lot of people are starting to move forward, and they're starting to take steps. And I think HRT was one of the first ones, and which is great because there was one horrible study that said all of this, and all of our mothers had to suffer as a result. I had that conversation with my mom. I mean, she said, yeah, I heard this study and I gradually took myself off of it, and, thank goodness. And I said, well, like, I'm on it and it's a godsend. And she was like, I know, because I remember when you weren't on it. So, for most people, and it's not just the attitude, it's, and the personality, but it's also, your body and your bone structures and things that you don't think about. And I very much respect an incredible menopause and perimenopause doctor, Dr. Jessica Shepard. And, she talks about, listen, you have to be strong for the rest of your life. And if it's appropriate and if you're able to, hormone therapy is great for you. But we're starting to get people moving because there's so much information and so much detail out there, and so many reports and so many, books, such as my own. And people are wanting to do something with that. And they're finally able to, in a concrete way that's not necessarily just charity and just advocacy and just because it's the right thing to do. There are so many reasons that this is a great investment space. This is great to do within your company. It's, of course, a smarter business decision to have women as part of your design teams. I mean, we don't think about these things, but I mean, if you don't have a woman who's actually part of a design team, have they tested the products for the actual intended use, or do they have any insight? I mean, an all-male team creating a product for a woman, they have no lived experience or no different thought processes. And it doesn't have to be a lived experience. It just has to be a different thought process. So there's finally momentum around that. And thank God there's, women in all levels of education in school. And as an engineer, thank goodness, there's even more women in engineering school coming out. So I think, part of why I put the word unavoidable in the book title is because it is like, there's no other, like, it's in your face. There's no other way to go with this.
Right. Well, and I think, and you talked about the internationally too. I mean, and sort of the cultural differences between how and what we're comfortable talking about. Obviously, it changes as you go from state to state, let alone country to country and continent to continent. But what are you seeing as you travel? You just said you were in Asia. Talking about the book, has anything struck you? Are things, are there communities that have been more receptive to this conversation? What are you taking from that kind of global outlook?
I think everybody's receptive to it. And again, it's been so much in their face, and you react to data, you react to information. And just as we did with space race, and we talk about space tech, and we talk about Bitcoin, and fintech, and all of these things. You react to the reports, you react to the information, and that's exactly what's happening now. I think there's a massive conversation that's happening in Africa, so I do a lot of work there as well. It's very, obviously different culture, but it's being widely adopted because they know that women hold up the entire society. Asia, women are highly regarded as well in many cultures. And so it's becoming more of a mainstay. Obviously, a lot of it starts in the US, and it's not enough in the US, but I think a lot of the conversations are saturated and they're starting to go other places. And so it looks different other places and outside of the US, it absolutely does. But you can have these conversations and, between New York and Nairobi, and I was just in Asia, and you can have those same conversations, and it's very much still part of the discussion, and people actually want to have those discussions. Now, it's not everybody. And I think you have to be sensitive to what the discussions are, and also what the applications are, because what we would develop here in the US and use here might not be the same as what is actually needed in Nairobi or in India or somewhere else. Not to say that they don't need an incredible product. They do. They just need a better and different incredible product. And it doesn't always look the same. And I think I've been in this space long enough to know that what we develop for a hospital system in the US is not necessarily the same as what a hospital system in Nairobi is going to use.
But the interest is there, and it is.
The interest is there. There's femtech conferences that are happening everywhere. There's a women's health being put on general healthcare conference circuits and discussion points. Maternal health has always been on the agenda everywhere, especially, outside of the US. And now it's expanding to other places, so in other areas. And so when we talk about women's health being on the agenda, it's on the agenda. Now it needs to be on a bigger agenda. It needs to be in bigger spaces, obviously, and being more part of the agenda. But we talk about the World Economic Forum. I was just in Asia, in China for those meetings, and it's on the agenda. I was just in Korea. There was a femtech discussion that was happening there as well. It's also part of corporations. They're knowing that this is a big market segment that people are paying attention to, and it's a huge market that deserves to be served.
Right. And tell our audience where they can get Undervalued to Unavoidable. I know it was released in June. So what's the best way for them to get their hands on a copy and also get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So marissafayer.com has all the resources, also links to the book, which are both in barnesandnoble.com and at Amazon or directly on our website. And that's how they can get it. Audiobook should be coming out soon as well. So everyone can listen to either myself narrate it or somebody else. It's available. Just reach out to me and we'll make sure you get a copy.
That's great. Well, thanks so much, Marissa. It's been great to connect and to learn about the book. And I'm excited to read it myself and share it with my friends and colleagues who all care about this topic very much. So thanks so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So here's the takeaway. Women's health is not a cause. It is infrastructure. And the capital that flows to it shapes economies, productivity, and lives. Thanks for joining us, Marissa. And thanks to our audience for listening. Women's health is not a cause. It is infrastructure, and the capital that flows to it shapes economies, productivity, and lives. If this conversation got you thinking, and that is kind of the whole point, share it with someone who needs to hear it, subscribe to Digital Health Talks, follow us on YouTube, and visit Health Impact Live. This is Megan Antonelli, CEO of Health Impact Live, and this is Digital Health Talks. Let's keep fixing healthcare one conversation at a time.
Thank you for joining us on Digital Health Talks with hosts Megan Antonelli, Janae Sharp, and Shahid Shah. For more insights on healthcare innovation and a deeper dive into today's discussion, visit healthimpactlive.com. Join us next week as we continue exploring the technologies and strategies transforming healthcare.